Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. This is your host, Ryan Coyle. Continuing tonight, our coverage of the NFL divisional preview series that I've been doing. Did all the NFC teams, did the AFC East yesterday, hitting the AFC North tonight. We'll be wrapping up this week with the South and the West, and then one final preseason episode with the playoff bracket, as well as my Super Bowl champion, and then some of the awards and the superlatives for this year's NFL seasons in my prediction. So tonight we'll be hitting the AFC North, where we have the reigning AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals in there. Also have the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Cleveland Browns. So this is a really good division. I think it's going to be very competitive. And without further ado, let's get right into it. My number one team in the AFC North this year, first place, I got the Baltimore Ravens going 11-6, winning the division, 3-3 in the division. That's good enough to get them the number 4 overall seed in the AFC playoffs this year. When we look at the offense, I'm not really considering this team, like just speaking in general, not really considering them much of a dark horse team, but I feel like the Ravens are kind of flying a bit under the radar going into this year. So if you want to take a flyer on maybe a team that is flying a little bit under the radar that could win the Super Bowl, I think the Ravens is one of those teams. I think that they have all the makings this year of a potential Super Bowl team. We'll see if they can have that playoff success that they haven't been able to, get over the hump with Lamar Jackson at the helm at quarterback. But going into the year, I think this team has the makings of making that run to the Super Bowl when you look at this entire roster. And that starts off with the offense. They were ravaged by injury last year, and we're still in playoff contention going into Week 18, despite Lamar missing, I believe, the last 7 games of the year and Tyler Huntley starting. And then their defense was all banged up as well. So looks like Lamar is going to be playing the year out on his rookie deal still without his new long-term contract. And I think he's going to have a monster season, flat out. I think Lamar Jackson is going to go out there and ball out and break the bank, bet on himself. And if the Ravens aren't going to pay him, someone else will. One of my theories is he's a Miami guy, a Florida guy. Things don't go well with Tua. We could see Lamar kind of make sure he finds his way to Miami next year if the Ravens aren't willing to pay him that bag and commit to him long term. This team is back, though. They're healthy, and they're ready to take back the North, make sure it's their division again. The running game is going to be dominant per usual. I'm not ruling out by any means J.K. Dobbins to lead the league in rushing this year. I think he is one of the breakout players of the NFL this season. I know they have very good depth in the backfield. They brought in Mike Davis, who's had some success in the NFL. Gus Edwards, Justice Hill have been in there for a while. Those guys coming back as well. And then you, of course, throw Lamar Jackson's rushing ability into the fold. That's going to make it tough for Dobbins to lead the league in rushing, but he's still going to get a load of touches, and he's a big play waiting to happen. He's a guy who can take it to the house anytime he touches the ball. So if he doesn't lead the league in rushing yards, I think he leads the league in like explosive plays at least from the running back spot or yards per carry. He's just super big, super explosive. Coming back from this injury, I think he's out to prove that he's the guy in Baltimore going forward in that backfield. I think he's definitely going to be a top 5 rusher this year. He might not lead the league, like I said, in overall yards just because of lack of touches, but I think he's going to be in that top 5. The offensive line is back and healthy. They should be very, very good again. You got Ronnie Stanley back, who will compete for the best left tackle. In football, rookie center Tyler Lindenbaum out of Iowa. He fell to them in the draft as well. That's a really good fit in there for them at center. The passing game is the major question mark of this team, as always. Looks like they're going to have an elite tight end duo, though, with Isaiah Likely being one of the breakout rookies of the preseason. Him with Mark Andrews should be a really nice tight end duo. And then you have Nick Boyle in there as well, who is an elite blocker. He's like kind of what Kyle Juszczyk is for the 49ers in terms of just being an extra offensive lineman and finding ways to help the running game out even more. Hollywood Brown out at receiver, traded to the Cardinals. Looks like their top 3 receivers, though, are going to be Rashad Bateman, James Prochet, and Devin Duvernay. Certainly not the best group. That is a very worrisome trio, maybe competing with the Patriots for like the worst trio of receivers in the AFC, maybe even the NFL. But I like Rashad Bateman to have a big year and catch 80 to 90 passes with a healthy Lamar Jackson. And if Lamar's healthy and the line is intact, this team is going back to the playoffs, whether it's winning the division or the wild card. So much injuries last year, and they were still right there in the mix till the end. With the playoffs, especially on defense and missing your star franchise quarterback, that just goes to show you this type of talent the team has from top to bottom. So Lamar Jackson healthy, offensive line intact, running backs able to stay on the field. This team's going back to the playoffs this year. That's a lock in my book. Then we go to the defense. This is a deep and strong group that, once again, if healthy, should be one of the top defenses in the league. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of play this year and their style with longtime defensive coordinator Wink Martindale out of the picture now. He's with the Giants, so it's going to be interesting to see the identity of this defensive squad. They bring in, I believe his last name is McDonald, defensive coordinator from Michigan, with Jim Harbaugh will be the new defensive coordinator for John Harbaugh. So it'll be interesting to see if they kind of change up their style from that blitz-heavy, crazy attack that they used to always run with Martindale. Calais Campbell is back, though, still dominating on the line in his late 30s. Michael Pierce and Justin Matabuke are forces in the middle of that line I really like as well. Then we throw in the pass rushers with Odafe Owe, Justin Houston, good old reliable, still there. And then maybe you potentially get David Ojabo back, who they got in the second round, I believe, after suffering that Achilles injury, the star pass rusher from Michigan. If you get him towards the end of the season, and I'm not saying he's going to add the type of impact Von Miller did, but look what Von Miller was able to do. Kind of, I think the Rams really rested him until they needed him. Ojabo could have a similar role where, all right, this guy's coming in fresh. He's got fresh legs, not playing the first 12 weeks of the season or so. You get him for your last 4 games. Make sure you lock up that division title. Maybe you're playing for a bye, and then you get into the playoffs. Then you can throw in a guy like Ojabo into that pass rush. So that just adds another weapon to that team. Patrick Queen, a stud at linebacker, kind of had a slow year one, but really came on last year. And then the cornerback duo with a healthy Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey is just about as good as it gets in the entire NFL. Then they have 4 safeties. Well, they had 4 when I did all my notes earlier. They only have 3 now after they released Tony Jefferson today. But these guys are all going to contribute in a variety of roles, with rookie Kyle Hamilton looking to be more of that down in the box guy, making plays around the line of scrimmage. Then you got veterans Chuck Clark and Marcus Williams playing more of that back end role. This is a very, very good unit. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see them be the best team in the AFC. And I just think the overall balance between offense, defense, and then you have a great coach as well. That's the reason I have them winning the AFC North this year. You look at John Harbaugh, just a consistent winner, very similar to Mike Tomlin. It just seems like they're never bad. When these guys are on the sidelines as head coach, they're always going to be competitive. Really love John Harbaugh, one of the best coaches in the league, in my opinion. My breakout player, I raved about him earlier. That's running back J.K. Dobbins. Missed all of his second year with a torn ACL, but he was a monster at the beginning of the year last year in training camp. It looked like he was ready to take off, and he really had a strong end to the first half of his rookie season. So I think year 3 is his year. I think he's going to flirt with 14 to 1,500 rushing yards and be one of the top running backs in the NFL this year. And then 2 games to watch for this team. We got Week 4 versus the Bills. If you listen to my AFC East pod, I have the Bills getting the 2 seed. So these are 2 of the top teams in the AFC this year, in my opinion. And then Week 17, their home game versus Steelers. Always one of my favorite games of the year. Steelers, Ravens. Got to win that game at home, and that could be for a playoff spot potentially, or the division crown down the stretch. Now we go to my second place team. Surprisingly, not the Cincinnati Bengals. With some tiebreakers and stuff worked out, the Pittsburgh Steelers are my second place team in the division this year, going 9-8, 3-3 in the division, but that's not good enough to make the playoffs. They miss it by a little bit. If you listen to the AFC East pod, I had the Dolphins going 10-7, and they didn't even make the playoffs. So that means I'm not going to have the Cincinnati Bengals or Cleveland Browns making the playoffs. Make sure to hear why, in my opinion. But I think the Steelers had the chance to be the surprising team in this division. You just look at Mike Tomlin and his career as a Steelers head coach. All he does is win. Never has gone under 500 in his career. He brought that team last year to the playoffs with Big Ben, with half an arm, if that, and he was arguably the worst quarterback in the NFL last year. Just really brought nothing to the table besides just his veteran presence and just, I guess, guys maybe wanted to rally around him and get him to the playoffs for one last season. But the Steelers found themselves in the playoffs somehow again with Tomlin. I don't know how well Mitch Trubisky is going to do. It sounds like he will be this week 1 starter. But I think by mid-season, we'll see Kenny Pickett come in as the starting quarterback and really give us a look at the future of this team. Steelers have a rough schedule to start out. Don't have it right in front of me right now. But this is a team that has a few tough battles week 1. You don't really want to shake the confidence of your hopeful future franchise quarterback in Pickett. So I think Trubisky, if he's able to get them go 3-5 their first 8 weeks or something, serviceable record kind of around 500, and then, all right, let's see what Pickett can do. I think that's the best kind of route for the Steelers, not just this year, but going forward as well. There are a lot of good weapons on this offense, though, for whoever is under center. I think Najee Harris, as much as I raved about J.K. Dobbins, as well as I've talked about DeAndre Swift earlier when we did our NFC North podcast, I think Najee is going to be the breakout running back of the league this year and potentially be like that offensive player of the year that we saw Christian McCaffrey be a few years ago at running back, and kind of hover around that 2,000 yards from scrimmage mark on offense this year. I think he's just going to get touch after touch and a ton of carries on this team, and he's going to carry them most weeks of the season. Offensive line certainly concerning, a weak group, probably a bottom 7 or 8 offensive line in the league. So that could be the eventual demise of this team, and the reason that they don't make the playoffs. But the talent of Najee at running back, plus the receiving corps of Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and then once again, it looks like the Steelers hit on another receiver in the draft with George Pickens. That the Steelers franchise is the best in my 22 years of life that I can remember of evaluating wide receivers and just converting them to players on the field right away. You look at Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Martavis Bryant, Antonio Brown, just guys who they've drafted, developed, and just have came in and played really well right away. George Pickens looks like the next in line for that group. And then plus Pat Freiermuth, an emerging second-year tight end. That makes up a really nice semblance of weapons. You just have to hope the quarterback play and the offensive line are able to hold up. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see the Steelers make it to the playoffs. And that's mainly because of this defense, though. Another really good defense here. This is a division that has really strong defensive play. You can make an argument that they have the best pass rusher in the league in TJ Watt and the best safety in football with Minka Fitzpatrick. When you have two blue chip guys like that on both levels of your defense, that makes it a very, very good group. Look at the defensive line. They still have good old reliable Cam Hayward. Not the same player used to be, but still a great run defender. Will get you a few sacks. Throw in Larry Ogunjobi, Tyson Alalu in the mix. That's a solid group. And then Derek Highsmith is a young, upcoming pass rusher. Devin Bush and Miles Jack make up a pretty good linebacker group. You could definitely do worse. Jack is really solid. He's a really nice player. Bush has had a really nice start to the beginning of his career, but he's kind of faltered a little bit since that knee injury, I believe 2 seasons ago with his ACL. Let's see a few years removed if he can get back to his former self. I'm worried about the corners on this team, though, with Witherspoon and Wallace as the outside starters. Maybe they reach out to their old friend Joe Hayden, who's 33, and see if he wants to come back if these guys struggle. But a really good safety duo with Fitzpatrick and Edmonds to mask that deficiency at cornerback a little bit. But this is another defense that I really like. Head coach Mike Tomlin, I talked about him a little bit with Harbaugh. Just hard to say anything bad about him. Just finds ways to consistently win year after year. Never under 500. That's why I have them going 9-8 and over 500 and in playoff contention once again. Breakout player, wide receiver George Pickens. I don't think there's any reason to doubt why a young Steelers receiver coming in and playing from day one won't have success. He's got all the tools, all the makeup. We'll just see if the quarterback play is good enough for him to have a good year. The rookie out of Georgia missed most of last year with a torn ACL, but I think if he was a guy who he had a little bit of some off the field concerns and sound like, but if he played like all last season, he definitely would have been a first round pick. Another really good talented player at the receiver spot there for the Steelers. And 2 games to watch for this team. We got week 8 at the Eagles. Always cool to see those 2 teams match up every 4 years, this time back in Philadelphia. And as I talked about earlier with Mitch Trubisky, I think maybe that's when we kind of see the Kenny Pickett era start to take over. And then week 14 versus the Ravens, as I had with the Ravens, this is the Steelers home game versus them. Just one of the best rivalries in sports, in my opinion. Always a great battle between those two. Now we go to my third place team, the Cincinnati Bengals at 9-8. 3-3 in the division. The reigning AFC champ, I don't even have going back to the playoffs. I'm not going to say I'm shocked I have the Bengals missing the playoffs here, but I think so many things kind of just fell their way last year that allowed them to have that run they did, including, Baker Mayfield playing with one arm, Big Ben being a shell of himself, Lamar and basically the entire starting group of the Ravens being hurt all last season. And these guys stayed healthy, avoided major disaster all year. And you need those breaks, those kind of lucks as you go through an NFL season. And they got all that. Certainly a talented team. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see them win the division, back in the playoffs again. Still an elite offense, and they should be right in the mix for the playoffs, but I have them missing it narrowly. This is just such a good AFC. Since 2000, though, I looked it up before this, it might even go a little further back. This is an interesting nugget I think I found. No team from the AFC has gone back to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years other than New England Patriots. So that kind of just shows you how hard it is to get back. So for everyone saying, they'll be back, they're young, they're loaded, they're ready to go again, it is just not that easy. You look at Aaron Rodgers, his entire NFL career, he's been in one Super Bowl in the 2010 season and hasn't been back. As good as Joe Burrow is, Aaron Rodgers is still a better player than him, and he's only been to one Super Bowl in his NFL career. So very, very hard to make it back there unless you were the New England Patriots in the Brady Belichick era. Burrow, stud though. Jamar Chase, stud. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, great complementary pieces at receiver as well. And then Joe Mixon, a top 10 running back in the NFL. Hayden Hurst in for CJ Uzomah at tight end. I think that's a little bit of a drop-off that could hurt this offense a tad bit. The line has been the weak point of this team over the years, but they're really improved going out and getting Ted Karras, Lyle Collins at tackle, Alex Cappa at guard now. This is a much better group up front and should give Joe Burrow much more time and keep him healthy long-term. The AFC is just so loaded, though. I think they have a bit of a Super Bowl hangover this year and narrowly missed the playoffs. But it wouldn't surprise me at all to see them win the division. Just the way my predictions shook out, I predicted every single game on the NFL season, had them go 9-8 and finish in third in the AFC North. Look at the defense. This is a young group that has been improving over the years, thanks to some good draft picks as well as some good free agent signings. And they just continue to get better. Trey Hendrickson, a stud pass rusher. Over the last 3 seasons, he is top 5 in sacks in the NFL. Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader, and BJ Hill are really good pieces up front, make up for a strong defensive line. Jesse Bates is back at safety after his holdout. And then they have Von Bell, another really safety back there, and an intriguing defensive chess piece with their first-round pick with Dax Hill that I like, and I think he's going to have a nice year. Mike Hilton, a really good nickel cornerback. But the outside corners with Eli Apple and Chidobe Awuzie worry me a bit. I think that could be the downfall of this team eventually. And then Logan Wilson, a really good, underrated inside linebacker in the middle of that defense out of Wyoming a few years ago. Really like him. Coach Zach Taylor really came on last year, was coaching for his job, led his team to the Super Bowl, and was in that game the whole time. Showed that he can lead this young group. Still don't know how great of an overall coach he is. I think this year will tell a lot about him and whether or not those kind of fortunate events that I think the Bengals ran into last year were luck related or if it was just overall good team play and a well-coached team. I think this is a big year for him to prove that he really is a legit NFL head coach and belongs. And then my breakout player, I got safety Dax Hill, the first-round pick out of Michigan. I think the Bengals are going to move him all over. I really liked him coming out because of his versatility. I think he can cover well. He'll be able to match up against some slot receivers, some running backs, some tight ends, use him all over, and make him a really versatile piece in your sub packages. And 2 games to watch, Week 13 versus the Chiefs, rematch of last year's AFC Championship game. Don't really need to say much more about that between Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. And then Week 18 versus the Ravens, that could be if all things shake out, maybe for the division title between those 2 teams or even just a playoff spot. And then we go into my last place team in the division this year. And I think you can make an argument that this is going to be the most disappointing team in the NFL this year if it shakes out like this. And that's the Cleveland Browns going 5-12, 3-3 in the division. The Cardinals of the AFC for me, if you listen to the NFC West podcast, 5-12 would make them by far the most disappointing team in the AFC and maybe the entire NFL rivaling Arizona. I just think between the Cardinals and the Browns, too much offseason turmoil between the most important player on your team. Both got paid big-time deals with Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson, and I have them both finishing under 500 and missing the playoffs. That could cost people some jobs. Watson will be out the first 11 games, as we know. That's all I want to say on that. Never really want to talk about this situation again. Just so sick of hearing about it day after day after day. Brissett is now in as a starting quarterback for those first 11 games. Solid quarterback, but he's going to go 5-6 at best, in my opinion, in those games. This team just went through so much crap this offseason between the Baker situation, Deshaun, Jarvis Landry being requesting to be released, Kareem Hunt requesting a trade a few weeks ago. It just seems like problem after problem, and that usually spells disaster as we run into the season. They have an elite offensive line and running back duo, though, with Chubb and Hunt. So if they're able to run the ball and the line is healthy, they will be competitive. But with Brissett in this lineup, this could be the worst passing attack in the league until Deshaun Watson's back. Amari Cooper was their big receiver pickup of the offseason, but he's good for half the season. He'll have a few big games, and then he usually gets hurt or falls off and just kind of lacks effort, it seems like, or interest in the game as the season goes on for some reason. Donovan Peoples-Jones, a solid receiver, but he's more of like a number 3. And then behind that is major unknowns. Rookie David Bell, who had a really nice career at Purdue. We'll see if he can translate to the NFL. Anthony Schwartz, a speedster out of Auburn a few years ago. Those guys are going to be counted on to play large roles. That's just a really weak receiving core. And then David Njoku and Harrison Bryant is a nice tight end duo for that team to round out the offense. Defense, Myles Garrett is the headliner of this group, obviously. I think he's the best pass rusher in the entire NFL. Either him or Nick Bosa, in my opinion, are going to win the Defensive Player of the Year this year. So put some money down on that one. I never miss on my bets. Clowney is hit or miss on the other edge. And then the interior defensive line is rough. I think they're going to be getting ran on up the middle a lot this year. Taven Bryan, former first rounder out of Florida, picked by the Jags, hasn't lived up to his draft status. And Jordan Elliott, I believe he's out of Missouri, isn't much either there in the middle. So I think this team's going to get ran on a lot this year. I love Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I was really high on him coming out of the draft last year. Went out and had a great rookie season. Secondary is really, really good, though. Could be the best secondary in the entire AFC. This division has some really strong secondaries, but the Browns is the best in my opinion. Greg Ward and Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome make up a really, really strong cornerback duo. Two nice building blocks going forward for them. I like Greedy Williams as the nickel corner, and then Delpit and John Johnson the third make up a really nice safety duo. So I don't see any holes there. My thing with this team, if the secondary is as good as they are on paper on the field and they're able to cause some turnovers into points or even just turn that into good field position for the offense, the Browns, I think, will be maybe more around the 500 marker. But I'm just too low on this team with their whole offseason and with Brissett playing quarterback for 75% of their season. I just think that it just spells disaster with what has gone on. And I just think that there's so many distractions with what happened with the Cardinals. I think those teams are two very comparable organizations for this season. Head coach Kevin Stefanski, it'll tell me a lot about him this year. Underachieving year last year after first year leading them to the playoffs and a playoff win over division rival with the Steelers. If he can right the ship with everything that's going on this offseason, this team does find a way to the playoffs, I'll think very highly of him. But if he allows them to crumble, get kind of sidetracked with all these off-field distractions, I'm going to look at him as one of the lower ranking, I guess, head coaches in the entire NFL. So this is a big year for him. I know he wants to impress me specifically. So Kevin Stefanski, if you're listening to this year, I'm going to be watching you and the Cleveland Browns closely. And then breakout player, linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, already had a really nice year one, 76 tackles, 1.5 sacks. I think he's a guy who's going to be over that 100 tackle marker this year. And we're going to be looking at next year at like our top 5 linebackers, and you're not going to be able to leave him off the list. This guy just has a heat-seeking missile. He's sideline to sideline speed, a really nice player in coverage, I think, as well. I think he has a really big season this year for this Browns defense. And then 2 games to watch. Usually I've been doing throughout this series, one non-division game, one division game, but can't do that with this team. You got week 1 at the Panthers, Baker Mayfield against the Browns, and then you got week 13 at the Texans, Deshaun Watson's first game back, of course, against the Texans. Just great NFL television there for you. Going to be a lot of eyeballs on the screens for that one. So to wrap it up, Ravens 11-6, getting the 4 seed, the only team from the AFC North to the playoffs. Steelers 9-8, missing the playoffs. Bengals 9-8, missing the playoffs, and Browns maybe the most disappointing team in the league this year, going 5-12 and missing the playoffs. But that'll do it for this episode of Beef Up Front here on Pick Swap Media. We will have 2 more division preview episodes with the South and the West, and then our playoff bracket as well as NFL awards and superlatives before we have kickoff next Thursday between the Bills and the Rams. So make sure to stay tuned going forward. We got a lot more content coming out as we approach football season and get going in that regard. So thank you everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk soon.